Okay, so welcome to the September 17th Planning Board meeting. On the agenda this evening, we have just two items, review our minutes from August 20th. And then we have the housing plan that is being put forward by the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. So why don't we start with the minutes? And then before we start in on the housing plan, I'll just say a little bit about the format of the meeting because we have a lot of new people here who aren't normally at planning board meetings. So the minutes, has everyone had a chance to look at those? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I actually have one minor change, which is, I think, a piece of information that should be included fell off, and that is that we had a resignation. Nancy has resigned as a delegate from regional planning, very understandable. It's a lot of time. It's a big time commitment. So at this point, we did not have someone who was eager to fill that time slot. So right now, we've had the resignation and we have an opening there. Okay. So if that can just be included, I'm ready to approve the minutes. How does any other comments?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
So we'll approve the minutes with that change. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, so next up, we have the housing plan, and this is a public hearing, so I want to just sort of describe the format a little bit. We'll start by having Jan Ackerman, who is here from the Affordable Housing Trust Committee, update us a little bit. We've had two meetings previously with the planning board. There's been some back and forth with, requests for certain changes and so on. Some changes were made, some weren't. And she is going to just update us on where we're at there. Once she has had a chance to do that, we are going to move on to allow the planning board to ask questions about the plan to Jan and any other members of the trust who are here. And once all the planning board members have had a chance to ask questions, we're going to move on to the part of the meeting where people can speak in favor and people can speak against. Okay? So what I'd like everyone to do is, we've got two people on Zoom. That's John Loyavice and Werner. And as you would like to speak, please just come up to the podium and introduce yourself. Otherwise, it's very hard for people watching these meetings afterwards to know who's speaking. So if you can do that, that will be very helpful. If you truly feel uncomfortable coming up to the podium and introducing yourself, just let me know and we'll figure out another approach. Okay? So I'll introduce myself and the members of the board in case you can't see our placeholders. My name is Kate Fletcher. This is Gary Pitney. This is Eric Egan, our newest member of the board. This is Carl Sprague, Wayne Slosik, Nancy Sosha, and Liz Wheeler. So with that, I'll turn this over to Jan, if you'd like to, get up and do an update for us.
So thank you for having us return.
Welcome, by the way. Thank you. Yes.
And Kate asked me if I would, rather than go through the whole discussion again, because you've heard it twice already, so that I would just identify what are the changes that you requested last time that we have made and the ones that we haven't made and why. So the first one is to make the table of contents clickable, which I didn't know how to do before, but I now do know how to do it because I went and learned how to do it. So the table of contents is now clickable for anybody who's reading it. So the second one was to add a provision in the zoning strategies to study the impact of the short-term rentals on the housing inventory and the housing stock in town and what the effect of the short-term rentals are on that. that's something that the planning board would do, and I think you're planning to do it anyway. So we have put into table 1.1, which is the language that you suggested. Kate,
Thank you. Yeah,
for that short-term rental.
thank you.
The third one is on page 62. You asked that we mention that we need to do some work on the ADU bylaw, which you already know because the state's change in the ADU provision. And you've been planning to do that in any event. So that is now mentioned on page 62 of the document. I think the only other one that we had a discussion about in terms of doing it was to add a total list of all of the town-owned properties. And we've not done that for a couple of reasons. One, there are about 43 town-owned properties. I think 44 now with the Glendale Mill Road property. And most of those, the vast majority of them are for things like the town hall, building we're in now, around and so on next to it, the cemetery, the Indian burying ground, the beach, the town beach, the building that's being converted into a school that used to be the town hall, the transfer station, and then there are a series of very small pieces that are like a triangle as 2 or 3 roads come together. Most of those are less than a half an acre. And 1 or 2 of them actually abut the Mass Pike and are jointly owned by the Mass Department of Transportation. So what we did was Michael Canales, who's the town administrator, and Michael Blay, the assessor, went through each and did their own evaluation of each of the town-owned properties at that time, which did not include the Glendale Middle Road at that time, and looked at whether they felt that there was a possibility it could be developed for affordable housing. And they came back and said to me, there are really only 2 that they could identify. One of them is on North Church Street. It's 1.3 acres, very close to roads coming together. So whether you could have setbacks or not, it's 1.3 acres in an R4 zone. So at most, you might be able to put 1 house on there if you had zoning exceptions. The second property is over on hold on 1 second. So it's on the Interlake and Crossroads. And it's 4.4 acres. It's right near the Curtisville Bridge. And I went over and looked at it also. What it is it's right by the street. The stream goes right through this property in 2 different places. So it runs through it at the top and then comes back around and runs through it and goes under the bridge. So the property is right up against the Curtisville Bridge. And I think there was some discussion about flooding concerns surrounding the whole Curtisville Bridge replacement and that whole discussion that went on. So, but they're 4.4 acres. It also has part of the very end of the Stockbridge Bowl come through the property in another location. So I didn't walk all the way back into there. I don't know whether, I mean, there may be some way to develop that. And both Michaels were not sure because they hadn't walked back there either. But that's the only other property. The other properties, there's one that's up along the road over to West Stockbridge, right after you pass where the Mass Pike goes under it. But it's the side of a mountain. So how you would build on that, I don't know. So those are really, so we have not included because it doesn't seem like there are really a lot of viable options other than at this point pointing out that the Glendale Middle Road is a town-owned property.
Okay.
And so
Thank you.
that's why.
Great. And I see you did include a list of acronyms, so that's up in the front, so that's helpful. Thank you, at least for me. Anything else, Jan?
I don't think so.
That's it, okay. All right, so at this point, I'd like for, and just as a reminder to the board, Jan is hoping that we will have a vote today, but we would do that after we close, if and after we close the public hearing session of the meeting. The board will have a chance to deliberate amongst themselves. And at that point, if the board is ready, I'll be taking your pulse. Then we can go ahead and have a vote. Okay? So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the board to ask any questions. I don't know if everyone has, has had a chance to think about it, and I hope you have asked questions. I know I have some I'd like to ask. So I'll start at the end of the table with, I'm guessing, Liz, do you have any?
I'm on the board,
Right.
so I don't have any questions.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Nancy, how about you?
No, I don't have any questions, but I think you did a lot of work. And I appreciate the work that you did put into it.
Yes, we do. We do appreciate that this has been a lot of work. Wayne?
I listened to your last meeting and,
The Affordable Housing Trust Committee?
yes,
Okay.
and, as I listened, I didn't, with all the information that was provided about costs and, viability and all the different things that were discussed that day, I got the feeling that there wasn't a real way forward at this point. It felt like everything was working against this particular project, especially in this site. And I'd like to know where you see it going.
So Wayne, if I may, certainly what we have here today is the housing production plan. And certainly the Glendale Middle Road project is connected. For
Right.
sure. It's like a case study
Right,
that's, going on at the same time, unfortunately. So just keep that in mind.
but I think it's pretty
Related.
intimately connected.
It, absolutely.
So
Yep.
that's why I bring it up. And I look at challenges and I question how it moves forward. And I heard that a consultant was approved. What would that, so I have several things, but what is that person charged with doing at this point with all those things before you that haven't been resolved yet? I guess that would be a start.
Well, on that property, the consultant is going to look at what the sewer cost, what it costs to bring the sewer lines up to that property for as many as 60 bedrooms. That doesn't mean at all that there's an intent to have 60 bedrooms, but you have to have some kind of indication of the size and preferably larger than what you would anticipate you're going to end up doing,
Jan,
so that you can look at the costs.
I'm sorry. So when you say the consultant, are you talking about, there's several people who were brought on board, it looks like, and one of them was somebody that you approved 7,900 to do engineering study.
That's what I was talking about.
Okay, so Wayne, are you talking,
That's the other person I'm talking.
I think he's asking about,
There was a couple different people there that were going to move forward with some information. And I guess the 79 was for the engineer. Maybe it's not the consultant. So I thought there had been a estimation of the utilities being brought up there prior. No,
There was a very rough estimate, but not really, and it's significant, so it's not something that one could rely upon, and that's why we want to.
Okay.
And, you know, it may very well turn out that it isn't economically feasible to consider doing this, but we don't know that at this point. And just to put this in the context also of the housing production plan, that is not the only thing we'd be looking at in trying to come up with and identify as many as 25 units over the next 5 years which is what the housing production plan looks at. Because we've also had discussions about heat and court and expanding heat and court. And there are a couple of other options in terms of, you know, what we might look at, very small. And, you know, so we'll have to wait and see how this turns out.
when will we know how it turns out? Or do you feel like with the information that these folks will provide, will be to a point where you'll feel comfortable with a decision?
Well, I think that'll be important input to it. I think there are a couple of other things, because if we end up having, if the cost is significant to bring the sewer and water and upgrade the water to the property, there are kind of federal or state grants that you could apply for, the town could apply for to help do that. But we'd have to do that in coordination probably with the whole sewer study that's been done and what the town wants to do on that front as well. So it's just early in the process to know. I think that there's also, we have a couple of, and this may be who you're talking about, consultants who are not paid. They help affordable housing trusts throughout the state to look at what are the options in terms of.
So is the woman from Hearthway, is that a paid consultant or? Okay.
And it is part of what she's doing is because the economics around all of this are different for rental versus home ownership. And there are lots of different programs that, you know, we'd have to understand a little more about the finances to answer the question, is this viable or not viable for a developer to do that?
So the Hearthway consultant, I mean, where do they get their funding then? They must be paid somehow.
Consultant doesn't work for Hearthway.
Who are you talking? Ellen?
Eileen recommended a consultant, but they're not associated with Hearthway. I think it's an important distinction.
Okay.
So can you tell me, I think maybe what would be helpful, I don't want to interrupt you, Wayne.
Go ahead.
So, okay, is if you can sort of outline, I'd be interested to know, so you've got an engineer who will look at the Glendale Middle Road project, a different attorney from town council, and then a consultant, and then I guess you're talking about potentially planners and a project manager, but that's not decided yet, correct? Planners and project not decided, but legal, engineering, and a consultant is decided?
The,
Consultant?
I don't know that we've decided on a consultant.
No, it hasn't voted.
There was a woman who attended your meeting
Yes.
and zoomed in and spoke remotely. I thought that was a consultant.
No, that was Eileen Pelletier,
Okay,
the head of what was Berkshire Housing and now it's Hearthway.
Right.
okay, so and she's not hired by the committee or?
Oh.
No.
She just has a lot of experience and is helping us not recreate the.
I see. I asked because I don't know. I also watched the
She runs the
statement.
largest housing group in the county.
I see. Is that a nonprofit or? Okay,
It's-
all right, okay. You have to remember, not everybody is immersed in this, so I
Yeah.
want people, I want everyone to feel very comfortable, including board members, asking questions. So, all right,
Also a group over in Boston that might also be available to do consulting, again, not paid, but
Mhm,
part of the state group.
mhm. So are they funded by the state or are they federally?
So I don't know the answer to it.
I see. Okay.
They're consultants for which.
They're part of mass housing. Right. So,
Kind of farther in the project, they would be.
or they might be in terms of looking at some of the financing options. And so on.
Oh,
So,
okay.
in terms of just providing information to us, because that would affect, how you might want to proceed, if it's even viable to proceed
Mhm.
on all of that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Wayne,
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Cara?
Well, I echo Nancy's observation of just how impressive and detailed this plan is. It really covers a lot of territory. And, really, just to boil it down, my impression is, there's sort of two main thrusts. One is ideas about changing, working on changing regulations to allow, for example, ADUs, just to create more opportunity to use existing buildings and create affordable units. So that's sort of a legislative one. And then, but I think historically, there's been a sort of a practical project-based approach to the successful affordable housing projects that we have in town that put us actually, in a fairly robust position as far as having affordable housing relative to other communities. And I think that's really about, identifying a particular spot, creating a particular plan, a particular group of people, pushing it ahead. And that's something that, I think we're going to have to, look for more opportunities. Thank you.
Eric?
I'll reiterate what others have said here, that an enormous amount of work went into this thing, and that's certainly appreciated. One question that I have is, when you're comparing, there are so many statistics in here. I'm not well educated in statistics, so I hope the movie comes out sometime. But as you compare incomes, however you parse it out, I think it's between 2010 and 2021 or something. Are those adjusted to the dollar value? Otherwise, so to me, that wouldn't be as useful, I guess. When you're talking about $1 in 2010, you want to talk about what the equivalent dollar is in 2021, or vice versa. You want to compare apples to apples, because, somebody making a very good salary back in 2010, if they're making the same number today, it doesn't go anywhere near as far. The other thing isn't really a question, it's just a comment. Again, looking at all these statistics and how they're all parsed out and everything. What is highlighted quite a bit is the percentage changes within, for different demographics, different income levels, different family sizes, whatever. But the town only has 2,000 people in it. So if 10 people move away, or 10 people make less money, or 10 people change their ethnicity, it's like this huge percentage change that doesn't really mean a whole lot, to me anyway. If you're talking about a population of 500,000 people, yeah, you can draw some inference from that. in my humble opinion. Even if you're talking about Pittsfield, whatever there's 40-something thousand people up there now, I think. It would be more useful, I think, there. For here, it might be interesting to highlight it, but I don't know what it gives you as far as what that means for the future or what it meant for the past or where we're going. It just seems for such a small pool, just a small change can make such a change, and that small change can happen anytime. That's all I have.
Well, let me just comment on a couple of your points. If you look at, and I take your point about inflation, but I think it would make, if we did adjust for that, it would make the picture even more negative.
I agree.
Because
I agree, and that's
one of the things in there is that in 2010, the median family income, household income was 55,000. In 2021, it was 46,000. So if you adjusted that for inflation,
It's
it'd be
30.
even more dramatic.
right.
Different.
But that would be, to me, that would be something that would be worth highlighting.
Okay.
Because that would represent a radical but very real change.
Right. And likewise, and this is not for inflation adjusted, but for the age, in 2010, the median age in town was 41. In 2021, it's 60. So there's a significant difference, even though it's a small population, there's a significant difference in the composition of the residents. And just so we know, coming back to the median income for a moment, what we're talking about in here is to identify 25 units that would be affordable over the next 5 years for families who have income at the 80th percentile of area median income. For a family of two right now, which is the average for households in Stockbridge, that would be 65,600. So, we're at 46. So we're not saying we want to develop homes that are available, that are affordable to very, very low income. We're talking about higher than the median income in town right now, that people could move in and have a home. So
Who is that target person? As you think about,
well, I don't know that I have a target person. I don't know that anybody in the trust has a target person.
well, there's got to be a general feel for who we're trying to attract.
Probably people who have children or have the, or younger, working. We've also looked at, and there's a lot of discussion underway right now in town about trying to make sure we have essential services still available. And if we don't have younger people to volunteer as EMTs and so on, and there's no guarantee that by creating these units that you're going to have more people who would volunteer for
I
EMTs.
mean, you're talking subsidized units, so you can't discriminate. Essentially, that would be.
That's right. I'm just saying, there's no guarantee that would happen,
Right,
but
right.
if we don't do anything, it's unlikely that they're going to.
But if they're subsidized units, is there a level of income that is cut off for folks that are eligible?
Well, that would depend on the situation, what the rental is and so on. But as I said, that's what that guideline would be right now, at least in this planning, which is a very general planning, would be at that 80th percentile of area median income.
And it wouldn't necessarily, you can't be biased towards local. You can't be biased that way. There can still be available to.
I think there are some, it depends it's tied to what funding we use for it. And I'm not fully up to speed on all of the options that we might have. That's part of why we want to have a consultant advise us on some of this. Because some of them maybe, you know, where you can have some control over who's eligible to live in those units. But some is not.
Is part of the impetus for the whole thing, it bases itself on local residents here that are not of a means to maybe stay here for very long. So if we're creating housing for folks, I mean, I'm trying to get to where we're helping the people that we want to help. And I'm not clear on how that gets us there if it's open to all. And we're trying to help and keep local families. I'm not sure how it gets us there.
Then we need to do some more homework on what are the funding sources that would allow us to do some of those. And I think we will be doing.
Is that an Eileen question?
Yes, it's one of her questions, yes.
Would that border on discrimination though, if you say?
Right, fair housing.
Yeah, I think it
You've got fair housing
does.
laws, so you're
Yeah.
very careful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's,
He's on the.
Wait 1 second, please.
he's on the trust.
Anything, are you finished, Wayne?
For now.
Okay.
before we move on, can I just say in terms of the comments of all the hard work, I want to mention again, you know, it's Karen Sunnerberg, who was our consultant in doing this, did an enormous amount of the work. So I want to make sure she gets credit for all of that as we go along.
Are there other, besides you, Patrick and Liz, are there other members of the trust here in the room today?
Randy just,
Okay, hi Randy, good, all right. Okay, all right, so did you want to,
I just want to comment on Wayne's.
okay, could you please go up and,
So the question of,
and introduce yourself, please?
what, my name is Patrick White. I'm the president of the select board. The question of preference, in August, on August 1st, the Affordable Homes Act was passed. Includes a designation for seasonal communities, which is 40% or more of seasonal homeowners. Stockbridge will be designated a seasonal community. And I'm reading directly from the bill, and it's very brief, I won't bore you. A seasonal community may acquire year-round housing occupancy restrictions for rental or other housing, acquire and develop housing units with preference for housing seasonal community public employees that are necessary to the health and safety of maintaining a year-round community, including teachers, public works employees, public safety employees, first responders, town administrators, and other employees essential for municipal operations. This is now the law of the land in Massachusetts. We now have the ability to preference the exact people that you're talking about without question of, I don't like the word discrimination, but we now can preference the people, Wayne, that you're exactly talking about. And I think that this law wasn't in place when we wrote the housing production plan. There's a whole lot of other parts of it that are going to impact us too. And I think it's going to be really important that as we figure out the workforce housing and whether you call it affordable or workforce, an EMP makes 46 grand a year. To Jan's point, they could qualify for a rental unit that we could build in the town and preference for them. Okay, so I just want to point out that we now have things in our toolkit that we didn't have even 2 months ago to try to accomplish what your objectives are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gary,
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay.
Other than to say thank you very much with the rest of us.
okay, I have a few questions. One thing that I've heard is that there is, we talked about this, Jan, a little bit, I think, earlier in the year. And I've gotten some input along the lines of, could you put something into the plan that is, you know, some aspirational wording that addresses the planning board role in terms of projects that you're considering?
well, I think there are quite a few things in the housing production plan that call for planning board involvement. All the zoning strategies would be.
Right, but I'm talking specifically about projects. As an example, Glendale Middle Road. I think it would, potentially, I did ask town council, she said this is something that we could do. And I'm just, putting it out there as something that I think might be of value to residents and communities where you're looking at projects. So, potentially is something, you don't have to answer right now, but is something to consider, okay? And then I just wonder if anyone from the trust has done a site visit to the Glendale Middle Road property and to any of the abutting properties.
I believe that Randy Warner has.
I spent about
Randy, could you
5 hours.
please come up and introduce yourself? Thank you.
My name is Randy Warner and I'm chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust. And in the process, when we had retained the engineers, I spent about 5 hours going from one end of it to the other and around and down and tromping through the swamp and the wetlands and everything else that's on the property. So yes, I have spent an extensive amount of time and I did it with the engineer.
Did you spend any time on an abutter's property though?
Well, I did not directly go on the abutters properties because that's private property and I didn't have an invitation to be on any of their properties.
Okay.
I spent one afternoon, I don't know if he's here or not, a gentleman who lives across the street from the properties finally stopped me because I was driving up and down so many times.
Making him nervous.
I was getting nervous. I was setting something up. But so I explained to him why I was doing it, because I was trying to get some perspective, both on the type of housing
Mhm.
and the entranceway, which, because this parcel has a very narrow
Mhm.
road. So
Thank
yes,
you.
it qualifies. I haven't tromped on any of your properties, frankly.
Thank you. Has anyone on the board been on any of done a site visit of the Glendale Middle Road? I'm just curious. Has anyone been on the property or been on one of the abutter properties? No?
Not with this in mind.
Okay. All right. So, one thing that I would definitely recommend is in terms of when you're thinking about projects, one thing I learned from a planner many years ago was the idea that site visits are extremely important, perhaps the most important part of an application. So I would definitely encourage you to do those site visits. And also, in terms of vendors, you may be considering planners and so on. Check out their websites, check out their work. I know several years ago, the planning board worked with a planner and things tend to sound, really good when they're promoting a project. And what I found was it's quite important to actually look at the work. And it could involve some traveling, but to look at that work as it has actually played out, you might be surprised. So as an example, I think I heard Mark Mills mention New England Homes. I took a look at their website. I'm not convinced that this is something that, would fit in with the character of something as an example like the Glendale Middle Road property. So that's a comment and suggestion. And then also I would definitely urge you to consider putting in wording that, promotes a planning board role, maybe site visit, planning board site visit with recommendations. So those would be my comments. Anything else from the board?
As monies become available, grants or other funding, I would just want to make sure that the monies that come in are still under either the trust jurisdiction or the town's jurisdiction so that we weren't dictated to. I'm always very concerned about federal monies or state monies that, yes, you accept and then you will do such and so. I don't want that to be part of what we accept. And I did have another thought. I don't have it right now. But that does worry me because I want this is gonna be for us to decide. And I do have it actually. The oversight of monies that are contributed by the town, is the trust gonna act independently of, well, it's independently of us for sure, but is the select board an oversight of the trust and the monies that potentially get given to the trust? Or is the trust an independent?
It's an independent,
Yeah.
but,
So,
Treasurer and the town administrator oversee.
yeah,
say that again?
the town treasurer.
Town treasurer and town administrator oversee the disbursement of funds.
Okay,
But that's in a very technical way. There's the funds, this is a committee that has enormous power. So the whole process is set up such that, you know, should there be an application for what's known as a friendly 40B, we're not vulnerable to a hostile 40B because we meet the state mandate for 10% subsidized housing currently in town. You can take a look at this to see how we compare to other towns across Berkshire County. So a friendly 40B would go to the zoning board of appeals, and it would be entirely outside of the select board or the planning board.
That's not correct. After it goes to the zoning board of appeals, before it gets submitted to the state or going forward, I think it would have to go to.
No.
No, no,
No?
But
sorry. No, excuse me. I just spoke with town council about this today. So, and let me see if I have the wording here. So a friendly chapter 40B is tied to meeting the state mandate of 10% subsidized housing in town, which we currently do. And that goes directly to the ZBA. There's nothing there for the planning board or select board. Now, the ZBA can include planning board recommendations, but they could also ignore them. It's their call, okay? So when a friendly 40B goes to the ZBA for review, the Affordable Housing Trust Committee, and again, they're operating on their own, would need to demonstrate hardship to the ZBA. And in order to get relief from our zoning, they would need to demonstrate hardship. Now, you know, that's assuming everything's working as it should. So that's, you know, that's the input that I have from town council.
with the lack of sites identified for projects like this, where do you go with that? As the town doesn't own anything that is developable. And I guess I'm curious, you're purchasing property that part of the plan?
No, at least not at this point. I think one of the things I want to point out is that this housing production plan is not, you know, voting to approve it does not say anything about the Glendale Meadow Road property in terms of voting to approve that project. They're kind of separate entity. Well, all this is saying is that the objective would be to try to develop 25 units over the next 5 years that in the town that would be affordable under the 80% of AMI, area median income. And it does not identify right now where those would be developed because we don't know the answer to that. And there isn't any penalty afterwards if we say this is our objective and this is our plan going forward. and we don't find property that's viable, and we don't find enough to be able to meet the 25 over that 5-year period. There's no penalty to that. It's really our kind of saying, let's see if we can move forward with that magnitude of development over the next 5 years or so.
With
Look for
what,
place.
just again, back to your last meeting, I know each site would have its challenges, its individual, but so much of it crosses over. The costs especially cross over. Money's needed to make it happen, cross over, and the lack of site, building sites. And I just wonder, I have a question before I finish that thought. How much money has so far been given to the trust to get going or to do what you're doing?
I do 225,000.
Okay,
And that's CPA funding, right?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
so
That's Community Preservation Act. I have to remind myself not to use the acronyms.
when, I don't know how far that goes with the work that you've done. But how much more do you deem appropriate with what you've all kind of not come to the conclusion, but it sure sounded like it. At what point do you say, okay, this really, probably not the way forward, or is the way forward, but 225,000 get you how far?
I don't know the answer to that.
And with no oversight really, as it's being explained, with that kind of money that's being given, some kind of select board oversight. I know you're saying the treasurer gives out the town planner. Okay, but it's really it's not really with what can or can't be done. It's the money is given and then it's in the trust hands, correct? As to what is done with it. There is no sort of, well, we deem it appropriate or we don't. That's just a thought. I'm just, it's a lot of
One
money.
thing I would just follow up with weighing on the idea of federal and state funds in just in my experience, there are always strings attached. So when you take funding for, well, you must know this, state funding for road work, that type of thing, there are requirements that have to be met. So usually it's not just, here's the money. We would love it to be that way.
Is there a point where some of us can comment?
That's for when.
I think if you were here at the beginning, where this meeting is set up in a public hearing format. And right now, we're at the point where we are, the board is asking questions, and then we will open it up to folks who would like to speak in favor and folks who would like to express concerns, but we're not there yet. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hey, just so you're aware, this is Michaela Donovan. She is on the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay,
And she actually worked with me on this housing production plan, so.
okay.
That's okay. I'll wait my turn.
Welcome.
I'd like to respond to Wayne's comment.
Yeah, right now, in case you missed that part, where, Wayne had a comment, and that's what we're listening to and responding to at this point. So, Patrick, did you want to come on up and respond?
First, I think that the question of oversight, and then I have a comment on Land on Middle Road. The select board appoint every member of the trust for, what is it, 2-year terms? 3-year term. So the oversight that's built in is that people don't get lifetime appointments. They are appointed by the board, the executive board of the town that is elected by the people of the town. So there is at least some oversight. I think that the question of trust and why they generally act independently is because sometimes the creation of housing is controversial and the purpose of the law is to not make it political. I'd like to focus though on the other most important point of that law I referenced earlier, which has to do with undersized lots. And I just want to read.
Excuse me, is this
This is specific
related to
this
Wayne's?
question of, this hearing seems to be dominated about the discussion of Glendale Middle Road, and
Well, I think Wayne had a specific comment, so I'd like to keep it to that right now.
Well,
yeah. Well, I get that, but I think that the question about viability of building housing, I think is relevant to the fact that the town is now mandated to actually create zoning for undersized lots, specifically and only for use for year-round housing. That opens the door once. What's that?
It's not what he asked.
Okay, folks, let's, Patrick, it is not what he asked. He was talking about funding, and Wayne, why don't you repeat the question?
The oversight, I mean,
Oversight.
you answered that and you appoint those folks that are on the trust, and that's how you're creating the oversight.
Right. But then you commented about when do we give up because that property isn't
Yes.
viable, and I wanted to address that issue because the viability of properties in terms of year-round housing has significantly changed in the last 2 months. Because now we have.
I think he's talking about specific projects.
I'll be done in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Can I just
Okay.
finish making my point and I'll sit down?
Okay, please,
All right.
be concise.
The fact is that we are mandated as a town to now figure out what to do with undersized lots. So in R4, an undersized lot is 3.9 acres, which is now mandated by the state to be buildable for year-round housing. Okay? That is a huge and consequential change that this board is going to need to deal with because this law goes into effect in February. And in the absence of guidelines that are developed by this board to deal with this new.
Excuse me, Patrick, are you talking about accessory dwelling units?
No, I'm talking about undersized lots. Every undersized lot is now mandated the word shall is used, to be buildable for year-round housing in seasonal communities. It is the most huge and consequential change that is going to impact us. Now, the good news is you can't use it to build.
I'm sorry, but I think what is here in the, if I can find it, hold on a second.
That does pertain to the trust.
I think it does too.
I'd like to hear it. What,
So if you're referring to the act, and as I understand it, it's the accessory dwelling units which are now as of right.
I'm referring to line 1363. And I don't really think this is the forum to necessarily do a deep dive into the Affordable Homes Act. I'm just saying that the town has a lot of options around municipal employee housing and around what to do with lots that are by definition undersized. And those are going to be two huge and consequential impacts on both the planning board and the Affordable Housing Trust that we haven't thought through yet because this is a brand new law that goes into effect in February. And that's the point I'm making is that, it could be this is like this Glendale Middle Road does 2 units or 3 units or no units, it's a park. That doesn't mean that we don't have lots and lots of options around town where almost 70–80% of the lots are, non-conforming to potentially deal with how we deal with workforce housing, municipal housing, year-round housing and the types of things that we may want to deal with. And that was the point I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you. Are you good?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so at this point, we can open it up to anyone who would like to speak in favor of we're talking about the housing production plan, okay? Do we have anybody here who would like to speak in favor? If you would like to come up and just tell us your name and share your thoughts.
Only in favor of something.
Right now in favor, then I'll get too concerned. Okay, if there's no one here who would like to speak in favor.
I would like to speak.
Okay, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michaela Donovan, and I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust. I live full-time here in Stockbridge with my family. I, I, I- I'm on the trust, so obviously I'm in favor. But I just want to make an observation. And the first thing is thank you to the planning board. I know you're all busy and we all have lives and we're all community members and we all live in the same town. We all pay taxes. So we are aware of that. I just want to zoom out and say that my observation of these meetings in terms of planning boards and these other committees, and I'm sorry, I'm not a politician. I have to be honest and say, I genuinely feel like we need to be honest as a community that if we do not want to pursue affordable housing and we do not want this affordable housing trust, we should just be honest about that and say that. Because there's a lot of, I feel, agendas happening, and there's a lot of, I'm going to say, gatekeeping that feels like it's happening. I heard some of the comments that were made tonight, and I'm frankly kind of disappointed and appalled by some of these comments. They're really discriminatory, and maybe they were intended or not. But, you know, I think if people are making decisions for this town, and there are people in this town, we should be representing everyone in this town. And we should be thinking about people with families, people with student loans, how we do diversify this town, both socioeconomically and racially. And that's important because that's the future. And so I'm sorry if I get very heated about this, but it's deeply disturbing to me that we keep dancing this game and saying we want this, but then every meeting that we have, we come up against suspicion as if we haven't done enough research. And yet the town boards are saying they don't know. So why should the decisions go through the boards when they're not doing the research and they don't have the answers? So to be honest with you, I just want to say, I think we should be truthful about if we actually want to keep going down this road. Because if funds are wanted to be used for other things, we should use them for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. I suspect that it's opinions on this topic are probably nuanced, and my guess is that it's if what you're hearing as opposition is more. I mean, I did hear people thank the trust for its work. I thank the trust for its work. I think you're hearing. As you know, we are an elected board, we do represent residents. And in this situation, you actually do have, you know, at the same time that you have a plan that's being promoted, you have a case study, as it were. So I think that it's more, I'll just speak for myself and if other board members want to respond. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And there are just, you know, various different threads that you're thinking about as you look at something. And after all, you know, this is a policy document. So this is, you know, this is a 5-year plan. And, you know, I think any planning board members who have questions and want to understand it could be forgiven, since is, after all, the trust is appointed. It was essentially the creation of one person on the select board who, you know, had a vision for the town, has a vision for the town that it will, you know, look differently. And the trust is a board that will have enormous power. So I think it's reasonable to want to understand this plan and try and, you know, understand the implications and to ask questions. And I will continue to encourage board members to ask questions as we take comments and or questions from the audience. So thank you. And thank you for those here in the room for your participation, and I'll look forward to taking more comments.
Could I speak to that?
Sure.
Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your time on the board. I think what we've come up against is Stockbridge was one way years ago. I mean, 50 years ago, we had an environment that was friendly to young families, and there was a lot of things in town that made that possible. You know, a myriad of things. We had, believe it or not, at one time, 27 farms here. We had 3 service stations. We had a hardware store and 2 grocery stores. We had all kinds of jobs for people in town, and we have slowly but surely pushed all that stuff out of Stockbridge. We don't want the smelly farm. We don't want the noisy gas station. We don't want that stuff. So I think we're trying to artificially recreate what used to be here. And whether we can do it or not, maybe there's a way forward to do that, in another way. But I think that we have slowly but surely taken the reasons a young family could live here out. And that's the way I feel we're headed. It's
Well,
not that it's
I
not a
appreciate
valiant
that.
effort. It's not that. And it's not about not wanting people to be here. Believe me, I would love to have the place where that could happen. It's not about hurting anybody's feelings. It's about an environment that's been created over years that doesn't allow for it anymore.
I appreciate that comment, and I think it's just more understanding what people who are looking for these kinds of housing opportunities are going through. That, like, for example, my husband and I together, we carried $100,000 of student loan debt. Had we not owned a home and refinanced that, we would not have been able to pay down those loans. And we worked for years to pay down those loans. So I just think that those are things we need to think about that we need to step outside. And sometimes in Stockbridge, I hear a lot of fear and I hear a lot about the past, but I don't necessarily hear about how we maintain the integrity of the past into the future. And that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
I think that's what everybody here wants, really, quite frankly. It's just that there's going to be discussion as we work towards that. So thank you very much. All right, so at this point, I'm going to ask if we have folks here who would like to express their concerns. If you can please come on up and introduce yourself.
Good evening. Hi. How's everybody? I hope everybody's it's such an incredible opportunity, for the town to reflectively think about its vision going forward.
Jackie, remember.
So my name is Jackie Harris. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And I wanted to thank members of the planning committee for actually facilitating an additional opportunity to talk about such significant issues. Just as background, I have the good fortune of being a second homeowner in this pilot town. And I'm also the former Deputy Executive Director of the New York City Planning Department for Land Use and Environmental Review.
I just think that is so cool.
Very cool. I loved it. I was thinking in my retirement, I would be using, just my expertise to deal with such crucial issues. I was also a Loeb Fellow at Harvard for the Graduate School of Design. So I have previously I prepared a few comments and I hope that you will bear with me. I've previously made several recommendations to the draft housing plan, which have been incorporated into the draft document. And I want to acknowledge also my appreciation and the hard work of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee's efforts to address the challenges associated with its critical need. I do have some concerns regarding the plan, which I will now talk about. So I'd like to focus my brief words today on several aspects of the draft policy document, including strategies associated with recently donated property, engaging the community in development proposals, and using friendly 40B as opposed to comprehensive planning and zoning strategies as a means of achieving our collective desire to ensure that everyone has a safe and affordable place to live. One aspect of the plan, it's Table 1.1 summary of the housing strategies, is to identify modest opportunities for a wider range of housing choices in specific areas. And I think that work is ascribed to the planning committee in years 3 to 5. Of course, the definition of what constitutes modest is not defined in the policy document. And I assume it will be part of the ongoing future discussions of this committee and others involved, along with our neighbors, as we review this plan. Regardless, I think proactive planning approach is extremely important, for it allows the town an opportunity to engage in thoughtful discussions and encourage development in areas that are served by transit and where existing infrastructure, particularly water and sewer services, are already in place. As an aside, hopefully the sewer study is nearing completion and it would help to inform the town where existing capacity for new housing is appropriate without having to use significant town funding for off-site improvements. The resulting discussions, ongoing discussions, will hopefully guide development where proximity to existing businesses might benefit from an increase in population and activate the streetscape, particularly when tourism is low. On the other hand, there is a real risk, particularly in the case of donated property, without the benefit of a well-considered plan, that affordable housing would be developed in a piecemeal, site-by-site fashion. For example, the only parcel in town, as I understand it, that's been used or been developed pursuant to 40B is Pine Woods, where there is a significant wetland presence all around it, very little existing housing, and is adjacent to the town's transfer station. The housing production plan suggests using the same tool, 40B, to develop recently acquired donated privately owned property along Glendale Middle Road. That parcel is located in a predominantly single-family neighborhood where I actually live. I must say that I've had the most wonderful neighbors, and actually most of the people here in the audience are Glendale Middle Road residents or live on Castle Hill or Cherry. So kudos to us for being here tonight. The site, Glendale Middle Road in particular, has significant wetlands. It's adjacent to the town's solar farm and cell phone tower. The site is very large, approximately 34 acres, which is anomalous to the surrounding lots, which are characterized by single-family, full-time residents whose families have lived in the town for generations. I would recommend that until the town develops guidelines or criteria for the acceptance of very large properties, particularly when significant town capital is required to bring needed infrastructure improvements to make any project feasible in light of our scarce resources, that the plan exclude these properties from its consideration within the housing production plan. As a side note, recent conversations and consultant work already undertaken for the site have concluded that approximately 72 units and 19 parcels could be facilitated through the 40B process. At a recent meeting, additional funding was allocated by the trust to analyze the potential for a 60-bedroom scenario on the site. Although the justification for this number of units was not obvious with those of us listening to the committee discussion, nor is a subdivision of that size at all consistent with the existing neighborhood development patterns. I would recommend that until criteria is in place as to whether or not to accept large donated parcel that will require significant zoning waivers, have the potential to significantly alter existing neighborhood character, and may require large infusions of the town's capital funding at this time. They should not be included in the plan, but revisited once that criteria has been developed. I think Selectman White brought up a very interesting point when he did talk about the 3.9 acre development and how the town really needs to focus on that. In the same way, I really believe that in that spirit, the town should be looking at large parcels that could have tremendous impacts on existing communities. It's also my understanding that while the planning committee may weigh in on such proposals, the zoning board of appeals would take the lead instead. I believe there is value in the planning board's expertise, particularly with respect to determining density, design, and scale of a proposed development. While a specific project has yet to be identified for the Glendale Middle Road parcel, it is worth noting that cluster subdivisions, for example, are currently not permitted in an R1 district in one family, in 1 acre zoning, and a zoning bylaw change by the entire town would be required to facilitate that type of development. I also looked at other housing production plans, looked at Sheffield, I looked at one in Lenox, And they do not address how large parcels of donated property would be developed. And I would suggest that's something that that this town really should look at. In previous conversations, I've also asked that the plan include a map of town-owned property. That suggestion was not acceptable to the trust. You talked to that, Jan, earlier, even though I was encouraged to do a search myself to determine if there may be suitable properties for affordable housing. Thanks to that suggestion, I did go online. And I did the town's website using the GIS map found on the assessor's page. And I looked at the portfolio of town-owned properties. I believe there still may be some opportunities to develop affordable housing on town-owned property, particularly as it relates to providing housing on underutilized open space sites. I'm going to stop because I know everybody has a lot to say, and I would thank you for listening, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, anybody else?
She covered the bases.
Peter Borinsky Jr. I live on Glendale Middle Road. Not as prepared as I'd like to be because I just heard about this a few days ago, and when I went to print out the 120 pages today at work, that didn't fit my lunch hour. But anyways, we'll get a little start. I will say, thank you to both boards for doing the inputs that they have and their opinions. I think they're very good. I have lived here my whole life. I'm probably one of the rare people that has had the opportunity to do it. It wasn't easy, but I got through it. We did it. And Stockbridge has been a great town to grow up, raise my daughter. It has changed. Stockbridge, as I was growing up, you could see the change. It started a good 30, 35 years ago, maybe 40, where Stockbridge was concerned, in my opinion, from what I saw and the information that I had. We want it to be green. We want to have open space. We don't want to build. We don't want to expand the town. We don't want to bring in chain restaurants. We don't want to really grow. We want it to be very quiet, unchanged. As we can see, our main street hasn't really changed my whole life. Still got original signs on some of the buildings. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it has affected the growth of the town. I think we can see the effect of that in even our neighboring towns. Like Barrington, Stockbridge, Lee and Lenox, Richmond. There hasn't been in the smaller towns, Stockbridge and Richmond, West Stockbridge, a lot of growth, which, okay. As I look at some of the projects and some of the land, and it surprises me that the assessor and stuff couldn't find some town-owned land that would qualify or be an option to at least have a few options. You never really want to go into a plan with one focus. And I think, at least from what I've seen so far and the money that's been spent, we're focusing on one idea and really, I don't want to use forcing, but really encouraging it to work. We have some vacant lands in Stockbridge. We have an old gas station. We have a few areas in town where houses have been torn down in the town. Whether they've acquired it or not, the idea is they're going to acquire it. We're in the middle of a plan, whether it's 3, 5, 7 years, I'm not really sure, of expanding our emergency system. So we're going to have a lot of buildings that are town-owned, opening up close to town, close to resources, in communities, kind of spread out so everybody can have a warm feeling and have neighbors and stuff and not kind of just be by themselves. And I also just want to mention the change of a neighborhood. zoning board and zoning rules and zoning bylaws are put into effect for a reason. Not all of us agree with reasons or understand them all, but they're put there for a reason. And I think it's for fairness to the whole community from, I think Stockbridge is 80 miles square or something. I don't know, it's something like that. But it's, from one border to the next, it allows it to be fair. And I think if we allow a project, whether it's on the east side of town, the west side of town, any north, south, if we allow that project to all of a sudden change the rules to fit what they want or what they envision without having multiple sources of where that idea can be applied, I think we're doing ourselves an injustice for the town that, I'm embarrassed to say, 250 years, something like that, old. A lot more than I know. But, it was on a path. We're not saying it was the right path, but it's changed. And I just want to say, I just hope that when we look at these zonings, when we look at this housing production plan, that we really dissect it enough to make sure that it's not going outside the boundaries. As a person in town, I also agree with some of the board members planning board members where I do think there should be some oversight. I don't think that hard-earned, whether it's tax dollars, CPA dollars, or whatever, I think every board that's under the town umbrella should be required to justify it, get people's input, and whether it's really their approval in the long run, but I'll use the word approval, just so that we have our checks and balances, so that every board has the same opportunities for financing. That's all I have to say, so thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Okay. I did receive a letter, an email addressed to the planning board. And I guess I'll just read that into the record. It's Dear Planning Board, I think there is a lot missing in this report and it seems to be in a hurry to justify a need, which it does not sufficiently document. It is critical that the trust be able to articulate a plan that reflects more meaningful input from residents. The survey and focus group study was too brief and inadequate. More than 50 years ago, General Electric and the mills began to pull out of the region. This left young people with no opportunity to earn a living wage. The tourist industry and related services could not match the wages and career opportunities big companies provided. Young people left in droves to find careers. This has been happening for decades. It is important for the trust to understand this. Living wage jobs drive housing, not the other way around. Jobs come first, then we build. It's a regional problem. We must also start with adequate public transportation so potential workers can get to the available mid to low paying jobs from their current housing. If Stockbridge has a 14% poverty rate, many of these people must live in the affordable housing at Pinewoods and Heaton Court we have already provided. Where are these numbers? My income is around the poverty rate, but my family's assets, including housing, were acquired long ago and passed down. I know others like this. Where are these numbers? The plan should be part of a far bigger and more inclusive vision for the future of Stockbridge. It cannot stand on its own without relating it to all the factors that make up a well-balanced community. Otherwise, it may make more problems than it solves. If it's raining government cash right now, that does not mean we don't need to plan better. Signed, Bruce Blair. Okay. Anybody else in the audience or on screen who would like to speak? You can come on up and introduce yourselves.
Bill Markham, Glendale Middle Road. So there's a couple things on the plan. I'm not going to read all of it, but on page 112, question number 4. Said the town should focus on promoting the following types of housing units in the community. Just read your top 5. not a single one of the options,
Sorry, Bill, I'm not,
page 112,
yeah.
question number 4.
Oh, I got that. I'm with you now. Okay, does everybody have that? Wants to? Okay. Okay.
Not a single one of the options is a current type of housing we have in probably 80% of Stockbridge, which is single-family homes on individual lots. Why isn't that included as an option? Right? Am I wrong? Am I missing something in there?
What is it?
So this is the results of the community housing survey, the summary results. And this was a question that was asked of those who responded. The town should focus on promoting the following types of housing units in the community. Choose your top 5.
Right.
Okay,
But nowhere in those options is it the type of housing that we already have. So it tells me they want to change the demographics of certain areas in town with different kinds of housing. They're not given the option of picking something we already have
I see.
as one of
Yeah.
your top choices. That's what you'd like to see promoted.
Well, this isn't a list of options. This is the response to the survey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Bill's point is that-
these answers, these multiple choice were on that survey. Why wasn't single family homes included in it as an option?
It's the small cottage style home or bungalow, not a single family home.
Those are all the houses up around Beechwood and the Bowl. That's what those are. My house is not.
They're not.
They were. They were in the 60s.
I still
The
haven't,
houses on my street, not a single one of them, I think, would qualify as a bungalow or a cottage.
Oh, I don't either.
I mean, I see your point. I think it's, I felt like the survey was
Right?
looking for the answers that it wanted. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
You know, which leads me to page 2. And it's the second sentence in the first paragraph. I guess this kind of more relates to
So Bill, are you,
page 2.
yeah, so the paragraph that starts with "it is the intention."
Yes.
Okay, and it's the second sentence?
It's the second sentence which begins, and I'll read the second sentence. It will also be important to ensure that any development is harmonious within the context of existing neighborhoods. Okay? I don't see anything in what they're proposing for Glendale Mill Road that fits into that sentence.
Can I speak to that? Nothing's been proposed.
Yeah. Nothing has been proposed.
You're looking at 60 units.
No.
Oh, no.
No, we're not.
Bedrooms.
60.
And we- and-
60 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms per house, 20 houses, on maybe 11 buildable acres. That's not even
Okay.
counting for the road.
This was just.
So I know I'm getting off track.
No, it's okay. I just want everyone to keep in mind that
I mean,
there's concern and tension, and let's
Right.
just all try to show consideration for one another and empathy. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Okay,
Could I say something?
sure.
So, perhaps it wasn't clear when I was saying the 60 bedrooms. That's only, there is no kind of plan or anything to do 60 bedrooms. The 60 bedrooms is only to look at the engineering report for sewer costs and water costs to bring those up there. And as I said, you really probably want a larger number than what would ever end up being there. So the second sentence you read about it being in keeping with the neighborhood, the trust members have said that repeatedly to each other. I think that is part of what we're very mindful of, and we've heard heard from the community how important that is to you. So I just want to bring that up and reassure you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have something to say that is about Glendale Middle Road project, not the plan. And I don't know if that's acceptable.
Come on up and we'll see. Introduce yourself, please. I'm sorry, Liz?
It's just saying wait till she gets here so they
Yeah, no, that's what I meant.
Hi, I'm Coke Forbes and I live on Glendale Middle Road. There's been lots of discussion about Glendale Middle Road and a lot of things that have been said and kind of pushed to the side. Hans was very generous to donate this piece of property, and he's done a lovely job on his acreage. We kind of say Glendale Middle Road is away from his property, so his property over there looks beautiful. He's done great. He's taken, so it looks like Central Park. He's taken underbrush out, he's taken trees out. He's taken land away from the animals that lived there. Where are those animals now? They're on the 35 acres of land. They're all over at our house. They're all there. And now the trust wants to take that away. And where are the animals supposed to go then? They think about people and making homes for people. The animals were here before the people were. And I think that we need to think about the environment that we live in. God knows with global warming and everything else, we're losing enough of our environment. We don't need to add to it by killing off the animals that are here. And I think that the environment that's going to be ruined by putting those houses back there needs to be addressed and needs to be taken seriously by the boards, all the boards.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, just so everyone's clear, I know Michaela, you came in late, so at this point, unless I have additional comments from the audience or from Zoom, the planning board closes the evidence gathering portion of the hearing, and then we move to deliberate. So this is the last call for any comments or input. Just wait a few minutes and, okay. So hearing no interest in additional comments, I'm going to ask the board, are you ready to close the evidentiary portion and move to have a discussion as a board?
What specifically, before we get to it, will we be voting on?
Good question. Thank you for summarizing. Yeah. So at this point, Jan, the Housing Trust, has asked that we have a vote on the plan. And so what I would like to do is have a chance for the board to deliberate. And I know I've made some notes. I have some recommendations, that I'd like to discuss with you all. So that's what we're doing is I'll be listening very carefully to you to see, do you guys are going to.
What would the mechanism be of, it's a vote. We have a draft in front of us. And the question is yes or no.
No, it's not just yes or no. We can make,
Is there,
we
is there
can
room
still,
for, are we proposing?
I'm going to make some recommendations for sure.
But changing the language of the draft.
We have in front of us a draft and they can,
We have to make recommendations.
Sure.
And then a draft could be revised.
Could be.
Okay.
And, my comments are not they're not many and they're just sort of small things. Well, some of them are recommendations that are, that have to do with the direction that the trust goes in. So it's, we can have a discussion and, if I'm the only one that has, comments or thoughts, that's fine too. It's whatever, if other people have some, then whatever you guys want to say at this point.
Oh, there's one person.
I just have one thing I'd like to know. You're gonna have a vote.
Come on up, please. Introduce yourself. Thank you.
Tom Forbes, Glendale Middle Road. I know that a lot of the committees we have one here that is on the housing trust.
Mhm.
There's people that are on the housing trust that are going to be on the zoning board of appeals. Is there a conflict of interest? Are they going to excuse themselves from the voting because they are on two different boards?
Good question, Tom, and I am so glad I checked on this before the meeting. The answer is that, let's see if I still have the text from Michael. The answer is that it's okay, that this is, this is a plan, and that Liz, who is here and is on the planning board and the trust, yes, just like the Community Preservation Committee, funding can be voted on by representative of that board.
So you're telling me if the planning board says no, the housing board can go to the zoning board of appeal and have that changed when there's members on both?
No, so what we'll be voting on tonight, and if the board doesn't want to vote, they don't have to. This is, actually, we do have to make a recommendation. Both the select board and the planning board have to make a recommendation. And Chucky from the select board wanted the planning board to go first. So, I will be writing up some observations and comments and sending those to the select board. So, and that includes Patrick, who's on the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. So,
So there,
in terms of this, what we're discussing tonight is this plan. And that's what we will be, discussing after the portion, evidentiary portion.
so
There's
you're
no,
telling me
we're not
that
voting on
there's
any,
no conflict of interest being on two separate boards that are involved?
that's what I'm told by our town
on
administrator.
council? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Come on, yep.
I have a question. My understanding is that if the town disposes of its property, it requires a town meeting.
That's right.
So, however, it's unclear to me, given the responsibilities and purview of the Affordable Housing Trust, if they can actually dispose of property pursuant to an RFP
So
without going through town approval.
right, so I asked Michael about this and he said that the town the town owns the property now.
Correct.
And the reason this came up was because I said to him, frankly, I don't think that this parcel is appropriate for, what's on the table here. And Laurel Hill would potentially be interested in it. And I think that would be appropriate because of the lower Bowker's Woods, to the woman who talked about wildlife, there's a big topic in conservation has to do with wildlife corridors. And so, there's a connection there between Lower Bowker's Woods and that property. They have to make their way through the Markhams. So what Michael told me was that that would need to go to a town meeting vote for the town to give up that property and give it over to Laurel Hill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. Anything else? Okay. So do I have a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing?
I just want to be clear. Voting on this and this alone right now. And this is just a recommendation from us to the select board.
No, this is a recommendation from the planning board as to whether to accept this plan. It's a policy document. It's a roadmap for the next 5 years, and this is a recommendation of the planning board. The state, when you look it up on the state website, they need to be, there needs to be a recommendation from the planning board and the select board. I think that's actually the actual close to verbatim wording, a recommendation.
Can I make a point of order? How many members of the Laurel Hill board are on this board right here?
You mean three?
Three.
Three. And you just made in public session when you're discussing.
The podium, please.
You just made in public session when you're discussing this parcel and this property, an alternate proposal for a organization you're a board member of to acquire this parcel. I'm frankly shocked that we talk about conflict of interest. You've just introduced the conflict for the three members of this board who are on the Laurel Hill Association. And I think you should get some advice on what you've just done before you take any vote on this proposal.
So my comment to that is that what I relayed was a conversation that I had with Michael in which I was answering a question that came up about conflict. And I relayed that as part of that conversation, or actually the question had to do with transfer of the property. And because in the course of answering that question, I relayed the context for which I got the information, which was a conversation that I had with Michael about, the potential future of the property. And there's been no discussion at Laurel Hill about this property, and there has been no proposal made about this property. It's just an idea. So with that, do I have a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing?
I would like to so move.
Okay. Do I have a
I
second?
second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So what do you guys think? Do you want to hear my thoughts and then we can take it from there? Okay. So one really small thing, one suggestion I would have for this document is, and I know fortunately it's not in the document, so I guess it's just a general comment, is I've heard reference to lowercase affordable housing and uppercase affordable housing. I find it incredibly confusing. I think we should just call it what it is, and that's subsidized housing, and just keep it clear instead of trying to come up with a new name for something. My other recommendation would be, one thing in terms of this housing plan, clearly I have some, you can tell from my comments that I guess, yes, I am somewhat skeptical because my feeling is that Stockbridge has been economically pretty successful. And a lot of that has to do with our property values. And I realize, there's a downside to that. But, as an example, a comment a resident made to me in the past couple of weeks was, how will this impact my property values? Well, of course, a project along the lines of no matter what you do, whether it's 3 to 5 houses or 60 bedrooms, that's going to impact property values in the area for immediate abutters. So I think that my recommendation is that the trust address the current issues of subsidized housing at places like Pine Woods, take an incremental approach, and the Glendale and Interlaken fire stations, Michael has spoken to me about those as opportunities for housing. So I'd recommend looking at those properties. I would look at Heaton Court. Apparently in the back, there's room for, doing something incremental there. And I gather that's Chucky's preference. The front part of Heaton Court, I gather the folks that live there don't want something to happen in the front, but that's, undeveloped space there at the front. And then another idea I have is to recommend looking at doing 5 units a year for a total of 5 units, which I guess is what's recommended here. And then to add a clause to do those in 5 different locations so that you don't end up with a large, something large, plunked in the middle of a neighborhood. So, those are my thoughts. The idea that I did check with our assessor and he tells me that our full-time residency is still hovering somewhere around 50 to 51% where it's been for decades, not at 30 to 35%. So, those are some thoughts, but I'd be interested to hear what you all think. Mainly, I think I'm just really recommending that a very, one idea is if there's no housing plan, then the trust is operating without a plan. So it might be better, to have something that is concrete that they're working with. But, my recommendation is to focus on doing something incremental, drop the Glendale Middle Road property project and let those folks go back to living in peace. And, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I I don't know if I'm going to address that directly, but I have heard recently that a plan is better than the concept of a plan. People I've lived I haven't lived in Stockbridge all my life, but I've lived in the county all my life. Pittsfield, Lenox, Stockbridge, wherever. And yeah, over the course of almost 70 years, things have changed. That's not something new. If you go back to the 1700s, even the early 1800s, much of this area was farmlands. There was about 50% maybe less tree cover.
Mm-hmm.
Things changed. I don't care if there was a plan or what anyone's intents were, good or bad, change is going to happen. In Pittsfield, I worked for GE. Who are they? I wish I owned their stock now.
No, you don't. You don't. Oh, you don't.
Things when they left town, when power transformer first and then ordinance and then or the changes that ordinance went through and then plastics and whatever, things changed. No one was going to stop that. That time period in the 50s and the 60s and was sort of the golden age for what that employer provided to the community. Things change. People have to adapt to that. I'm not saying that it's I'm not saying that specific neighborhoods have to change. All I'm saying is that specific neighborhoods are going to change. Whatever we do, 100 years from now, we're not going to have what we had 100 years ago. Okay, if you take somebody from the 1700s and march them down, Main Street here, yeah, things changed between then and 60 years ago. The automobile came along, telephones came along, things changed. Things are going to continue to change. I think the intent of the housing plan is to as best possible, adapt to those changes. The right decisions aren't going to be made everywhere. The right decisions haven't been made everywhere. That's going to continue. So instead of trying to make something that's perfect and that addresses everyone's particular need for that particular time frame, I think is unrealistic.
Well, yes, great. Well said, and I totally agree with you. But I mean, in the interest of having dinner, which I'm going to concentrate on more and more, we're here to vote about this.
Mhm.
And you've made some suggestions
Mhm.
as to, I mean, we could vote to approve with, depending on some discussion, I suppose, with or without those suggestions. Jan, could you,
We're done with the,
what?
close the evidentiary portion. It's just the
I
board.
can't ask anybody any questions.
It's just the board now.
Very well.
Can you ask their secretary?
Oh,
Try. And I-
there you go. No, I mean, the question being like, if we were to approve this with some riders, whatever suggestions, I mean,
Would you support that?
is that something that would be then,
You don't have to answer for your board, but
would it have to come back to
we'd
us
have some
again?
weight,
Yeah.
I don't
where
know.
you fall on it.
No, I think if you have suggestions, if it meant you were going to vote no or yes, I would certainly take it with suggestions.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other suggestions for the plan?
Well, I want to hear from Wayne and Nancy and Gary in terms of what I've
That's what I'm-
suggested.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm,
Oh, well, I'd like to hear his suggestions though, Carl. What would you note in those? I'd like to hear what your comments would be. If we're gonna deliberate, I'd like to hear what those would be.
well, I don't have any personally, but I mean, Kate mentioned two. I mean, she was talking about swapping out the word affordable with subsidized.
That's
And-
minor. That's minor. We don't have to include that. That's
Fine. And then,
just a comment. And I think the main,
what's your incremental idea?
And
And the 5 units a year in, with
I'll
note about
repeat.
different places.
I'll repeat. So what I'm recommending is that focus on addressing the current issues at Pine Woods, taking care of what we already have, in a sense. Taking an incremental approach. Look at the Glendale and Interlake and fire stations for housing. Michael's currently working on EMS solutions. And look at Heaton Court. Michael feels there's room in the back there to do something. And, take a very incremental and slow approach. And that's something that, the Heaton Court thing is something that Chucky is in favor of too, I gather. So, and then the other thing I suggested was considering doing just 5 a year for 25 units total and having a clause that those will be done in 5 different locations.
Considering we don't have 5 different locations, that's a little hard to do.
Well, so the issue I have is that, we're looking at this draft plan. And I assume we were voting up or no.
Right.
Up or down.
We can make
And
recommendations.
we can make recommendations, and I hear your recommendations. To my eye, the virtue of this plan is, in a sense, it's vagueness, that it doesn't specify particular locations, particular,
Okay, so take that part out. How about including the part about addressing the current issues that we already have and taking an incremental approach, looking at Glendale, Interlake and fire stations and Heaton Court.
well, I mean, again, that gets very specific.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can't want specifics.
All right, well, I do.
I mean, but
We aren't writing in here either that we're doing anything on Glendale Middle Road. I mean,
no,
there's nothing specific here. It's just a
why we've
plan.
been
on
talking
how-
about it all evening, I have no
What
idea.
are the demographics? What are our needs? What are that, and it's with the hope that we can fill some of the need. That's what it is. I don't think it was never meant to say we should do it here or there. We were just very lucky to be given a parcel of land to look at. We don't know when and if these firehouses will come up. Somebody must.
Sort of a fireman.
I know, my God. Anyway,
It's over.
clearly they're watching.
All right, so Nancy, Wayne, Eric, Gary, do you agree? Just leave it the way it is, keep it vague?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
that either we vote,
Okay.
we recommend it or we don't.
Okay,
Period.
does everybody agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, guys. Okay.
I'd rather see single family homes rather than,
So would we.
yeah, rather than, units.
And I think something,
Unit.
you know,
Single family
we
home.
have been talking about Heaton Court. We have been talking about if there are houses that come up, that the town, that the people have just left, we would love to have those. Those would be ideal. That would be ideal, much better than trying to do something huge with bringing a lot of infrastructure in. We just don't have anything in our hands right now.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, when I watched some of your meetings, in like the last meeting, I know there's not consensus on the Affordable Housing Trust Committee as in terms of scope of what you're looking at. So, that's just not, when you hear concern from the community, I think that's the challenge because there is no consensus on your board. So some people talk about doing, 3 to 5. And of course, the infrastructure for that 3 to 5 is not going to make it economically viable. So, and then some people are talking about, 60 bedrooms. It's a big difference, and either way, whether it's 3 to 5 or 60 bedrooms, it's a huge impact. You're talking lighting, you're not talking a road, you're talking, construction
I
traffic.
agree, because I'm one of the 3 to 5.
You're talking, all these, and this is not just going to be, don't imagine it's just going to be some dirt road. I mean, there you get into the strings attached. It's going to be a regular street. So, so that's kind of why I much prefer an incremental, deliberate approach to this, anything that's done.
I think the number 60 units came up because they were looking at, that was the way that the engineer wanted to look at it. Is that,
But again, we're talking about
right,
Specific.
this specific project.
right,
that
again,
is completely nebulous.
right.
At this point and doesn't have anything to do with,
This,
is not spelled out in this plan.
right.
I mean, I personally would like to make a motion to accept the housing production plan. I mean, I sort of would,
Is that a motion?
yes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Further
Second.
discussion, please.
No, sure.
Okay.
I feel like we're being asked to vote on something that your own committee can't find consensus on and really so far can't find a way forward. I mean, it really seemed very ominous the way I listened to your last meeting and I go, if we approve this plan, what truly are we approving? You can't, it seems like it's incomplete, as complete as it is. I mean, it's a half-inch thick. You folks have done an unbelievable amount of research and work. I get that. But I feel like we're being asked to vote yes or no on something that so far, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for it. And so I struggle with that. I feel like it's almost too soon to make a decision because what happens if we go forward? Right now, if we say, okay, yes, we agree with what's here. What is the next step? Is it, and how much do you and your folks put into this? I just don't see the end of it. Or is it just forevermore? And if a parcel comes available, then you folks are in charge of it. If there's nothing available, there's nothing in the queue that would have you say, okay, well, if something comes along, and if something does come along,
Well, there is
isn't there
the,
a mechanism right now to deal with how to do that? does it have to be the trust that deals with that? Or is it part of us and the select board that can say, okay, let's take this and let's make this happen?
Well, if it's about affordable housing, I guess it's up to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, the reason that, you know, the reason for the plan in part,
and the same.
is to qualify for, you know, state, potentially federal funding, because you have to, if you don't, in Massachusetts, if you don't have a housing plan, then you won't qualify. I mean, it's all taxpayer funds, but, you know, you won't have access to those funds if you don't have a plan. And I'm not, you know, I mean, I would definitely feel better about it if it had something indicating a more incremental approach than what I'm hearing discussed. And I realize you haven't decided, but still the discussion is there. So I would certainly feel more comfortable with it, you know, if you would include that wording.
And there's nothing organic. It starts with subsidized. And that to me, okay, where do you go from there? I don't see a way out of that. And is that just a forevermore thing? We're signing on forevermore to that idea. And if there was something that said, okay, there's ownership here, and I know we have heard before about a path forward for ownership / assistance. I'm much more interested in that. I'm much more interested in that than something that is forevermore subsidized.
I mean, to Eric's point, I agree, you know, things change. But at the same time, part of the beauty, character, and charm of Stockbridge has had to do with a lot of curating. I mean, look at our zoning bylaws. A lot has gone into, you know, making this town what it is. It wasn't just anything goes. You know, it was a very deliberate and considered approach. And that's, you know, that's my concern, is that I think that, as I understand it, that can be articulated in this plan, and I don't see it there. In fact, I see, you know, under challenges, I see criticism of our zoning. And then in another section, you know, I see our zoning is based on smart growth. It wasn't called that back then. But that's exactly what it's based on, the idea of a central downtown and rural outskirts. So at the same time that there's criticism of our zoning in this, there's no acknowledgement of what, you know, what has been of enormous value. I mean, think of all the, you know, the tradespeople who have done so well on construction here in this town. I mean, some of them I know when I worked for Osso Tavidian, retired fairly young, quite wealthy. So, you know, and then in another section of the plan, it talks about smart growth. Well, which is it? Okay, so that's why I want to see that wording, but, you know, I'll let the board decide these things.
So what if we take no vote? It's still gonna go, right? I mean, is this a living document, meaning that?
Good question.
Change?
What's the consequence of us one way or the other? That's a good question.
I think that we need to we've closed the evidentiary portion. And I think we could continue. I'm not sure if we could continue the public hearing at this point.
Well, we could only continue it for our deliberations.
Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, you closed it.
You're asking what the consequence of a no vote is.
Well, or not a no vote, but maybe not taking a position. Even. I mean, we could vote yes, we could vote no, or we could do nothing.
How about if we do a straw poll to find out where, you know, where we all are at in terms of an up or down?
Was there any other discussion? I mean, I think that I'm interested in that answer.
Let Do you want me to try and find out
If
whether,
it's strictly that we qualify for funding, if that's really the be all and end all of what we're deciding. I mean, because nothing's been decided here. There's
it's,
nothing-
it's, you know, Wayne, it's a roadmap, basically, without it, you know, they're operating without guidelines. If you have this, then it's, you know, their roadmap, and say, you know, someone comes up with an idea to, you know, do something that's not within the guidelines of this plan, well, you can refer to this plan, you know, as a way to get things back on track.
Isn't there a mechanism now for that? If,
Right now, the Affordable Housing Trust has no plan.
right, so how do we deal with something that comes along right now?
We are dealing with that. The Glendale Middle Road project.
Well, it's not been
That's not
formally.
part of this.
Don't bring it up. It's not even, it's not in here.
It's
It's not in here. It's not on the table. We shouldn't have been wasting our time talking about it this evening.
But
It's related. It's related.
something comes along where housing could be built right now. What's in place right now? So I just question. If that comes along, right, we have an opportunity as a select board to say, hey, here we are. You know, do we want to spend the money and do this or not? I just. What's our mechanism right now?
There's a zoning bylaw.
This is just you know, this is a recommendation. If you want, I can see if, you know, I can find out whether we can continue this portion of the hearing. Hold on one second.
I think we need more discussion.
I mean, in the meantime, if you guys want to do a straw poll on where you stand in terms of having a vote, we can do that. Do you want to do that? Do I have a motion to do a straw poll?
Get your answer first.
Yeah, it's gonna.
All right. Hi, so quick question. I'm on the phone with Michael Canales. And the planning board hearing is still on, and we've closed the evidentiary portion. And a question has come up from Wayne, who's asking whether we actually have to have a vote at this point. I wasn't certain whether we could continue the hearing or just have no vote. Okay, what about no vote? What about the idea of no vote? So it's just, if there's no motion to approve, there's no vote, and move.
There is a motion.
There is a
Right.
motion.
Motion's already there.
Made and seconded.
Okay, all right, thank you.
One
Yeah,
second.
right. Okay, so, you know, if you want to, you would have to have, if no one wants to make a motion.
It's already been.
It's already been.
Okay,
made and seconded.
so who made the motion? Carl?
I did.
Okay,
You can take it back.
so,
All right, we can take it.
Well, the problem with that is we can only deliberate amongst ourselves at this point.
Right.
We can't
We can
ask further
continue.
questions.
You can continue it the next time.
continue the meeting is what Michael said. So, but we have a motion on the table. We have a second. We've had discussion. And, you know, do you want to take your motion back, Carl?
Well, I
or-
mean, to continue the meeting, do we need to vote on that separately? I mean, isn't there some sort of, I mean, how many motions can we have on the table?
My question for you is, you made a motion,
Yes, I
there
did.
was a second,
Yes,
and there was discussion.
right.
Do you want me to call the vote? Or do you want to,
It's up to me. Okay.
yeah, it's up to you.
Do you want answers to these things? I mean, I just, now at this point, I feel like I want to talk further to these folks. I do.
Well,
And
I mean, we've had a lot of discussions. I mean, the fact of the matter is if we vote now,
It's up to you, Carl.
well, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Uh,
I want to have dinner too.
but I mean, I mean, depending on how the vote goes, we call it, we vote no. Presumably the need for a plan still exists. There's been a lot of discussion about thoughts that might make it more, whatever, better. But, I mean, so presumably, the housing trust would come up with another draft, and that can be resubmitted so that we eventually get around to having a plan. Or we vote in favor of it and say yes, and we can move on.
That's the option, yeah.
Yeah.
But you've made a motion,
Yeah.
so it's up to you as to whether,
Well,
I made the motion.
if the plan is approved, like the town bylaws or anything else, it can always be amended. If that's,
I think that's unlikely.
Because
it's unlikely.
Yeah.
So this is in stone for the next 200 years, the next 5
It's
years.
a 5-year plan.
only 5.
Procedural question?
No, we're done. Sorry. I know, it's frustrating. Yeah. So, I mean, Wayne, let me ask you this question. How would you feel if, I think you can help us make headway here, frankly, if we include wording, if we make the recommendation, it's just a recommendation. They don't have to take it. They can continue to be as vague as they want. Just make the recommendation that the approach be incremental and, where's my wording here? And that the focus be on additional housing at Heaton Court and the 2 fire stations in Glendale, in Interlake and Middle Road.
Yeah, I don't like that.
You don't like that?
Actually,
Okay.
The plan doesn't stop them from looking at those things.
No, but it's a
Plan doesn't
recommendation.
Talk about
I'm more interested
specific.
in finding
It's
out,
already in the document.
I'm more interested in
Sites.
finding out what happens if something is offered to us right now. What's our way forward? Or does it have to be handled by these folks in the trust? If we agree to this.
Okay, so Eric, it sounds to me like you're ready to vote. Yes?
Yes.
Gary, are you ready to vote? Carl's ready to vote. Nancy, are you ready to vote?
There's things that I would like in there too, not about just huge properties, but, if the state's coming in and saying that 4 acres, anything on, if you go under 4 acres. I mean, 4 acres, you can put 4 homes on it, right? But there isn't anything there about small properties. It's only like big properties that the town owns.
Liz, do you want to address that?
I can't.
Are
I
there
don't know.
smaller properties that the town owns that are, non-conforming that we could put a single-family house on?
They're looking at different options. So in terms of what they might do, there are different options.
But it seems one.
Clearly that, right, the options include a property like, a 34-acre property on Glendale Middle Road. So,
Smaller property.
or smaller, yeah.
Which I think it's addressed in this, I'm sure it mentions things like firehouses and other properties. It doesn't just, this is not, it tries to look at a more global look. Because when we were writing this, we didn't have Glendale Middle Road. This was not what it was
Right.
No,
about.
it doesn't, it completely does not spell out
Right.
any addresses. It doesn't give street names. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's
Including the fire department
yeah.
properties. There's
I
not,
mean, one could put generalized language in to make sure that, yes, considering like reuse of town properties or, but I mean, if that's not already in it, I can't recall.
So
It is.
all right.
The,
Okay, so,
but I mean, or addressing conditions in existing properties, but I
Okay, so I think we're ready to go.
It's
Um,
neighbors.
Carl made a motion. It's been seconded.
Who seconded?
And I think we're ready to vote.
I thought Eric seconded.
No, it wasn't Wayne.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So Carl made a motion, Eric seconded,
Eric.
and I think we've had some deliberation here. And I think we're ready to vote. So all in favor? All opposed?
Undecided.
You abstain?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, so you guys have your plan. I hope you heard
Wisely.
some of the concerns here and, you know, that you reach out to and, oh, we're not listening to me. Okay, are we set? I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Oh,
All in favor?
Hi.